שומר, סף number 56, מספר 56, and we will continue today our conversation we started before the election with Lee Smith, the one and only. אלה מכם ששומעים אותנו בפלטפורמת אודיו, תעברו לוידאו, שם יש תרגומים לעברית. Hello Lee, how are you?
Shalom, how are you doing?
Good to see you.
Much has happened since we last spoke.
Yeah.
Perhaps not that surprising, but a lot. Yeah.
This is not the conversation I hoped we would have. I hoped we would be looking at completely different results. But first of all, I've been mostly keeping quiet about half these things because I don't understand what the hell is going on right now.
I think, the way that I see it, and I think that you and I probably see it similarly. I mean, it's a continuation of what's been going on since before the 2016 election. And the way to understand it is not just a coup targeting Donald Trump and the Trump administration, but is that it's going after the foundations of the Republic. It's a very serious thing. It's a very scary thing. I mean, the way to understand it, I think, is to step back and let's go to the onset of the coronavirus, right? Which we all understand is a serious thing. I just heard very sad news from a friend this morning. His elderly grandmother passed away. It's just heartbreaking. It's a real thing. It's a serious thing. People are dying. What is not real, or what is real, but is not part of the coronavirus, is how this was used to target the political opponents of Democratic governors, Democratic mayors. For instance, I'm sure you followed the Supreme Court's ruling last week, where a number of both Catholic diocese and Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn were protesting because they were not allowed to worship. And yet the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, nonetheless kept open things like bicycle shops, liquor stores. Not that I have anything wrong with bicycle shops or liquor stores, mind you, but the idea that these different places where people gather and congregate and shop and speak, that it was okay to keep these places open, but what needed to be closed were houses of worship. That's a very good picture and microcosm of what's been going on here, right? The coronavirus has been used to target people who are political opponents, people who are I don't even think it's fair to call them. It's not a political issue so much as these are just people who worship God and they want to go to houses of worship. But this was a problem where other gathering places were not a problem. So if we start with the coronavirus, then we go into the riots here, known as the George Floyd riots, right? Which, of course, were not peaceful. You had the press saying, it's mostly peaceful riots. It's absurd what happened. Major American cities were razed and looted. And what happened? When Americans said, what's going on here? They said, never mind. They're peaceful protests. It's about racism. They're allowed to go into the streets because that's a more serious public health crisis than coronavirus. You can't protest about your businesses closing, but they can go out and protest against systemic racism. It's not only we are not going to protect you from people destroying your businesses, from setting fire to your houses of worship, from attacking your homes. As a matter of fact, we're going to let them do it. We're going to defund the police. You're going to sit back and take it and like it because you're racist. If you complain, you're an even worse racist, but you deserve it and you're going to take it. That's what's been happening here. So when we come into the election, people are looking. You will know this as well as I. I lived in and reported from the Middle East for more than a decade. When you see different things, I was at I believe it was 2010 parliamentary elections in Egypt. And the only observers who were allowed in were from then President Hosni Mubarak's party, the NDP, National Democratic Party. And people went crazy, right? Outside forces like our State Department said this is not a real election. They're not letting in election observers from outside the NDP. This is one of the things that happened here. All sorts of irregularities that have occurred. So many Americans, Trump supporters, 75 million plus, in addition to others. I think I saw a recent poll saying that something like 30% of Democrats believe there are problems there were problems with this 2020 election. So that's a way to understand it. We're looking at, since at least 2016, this country has been in conflict. So that's the context in which these elections need to take place. And so everyone's, I'm sorry.
And election irregularities. I'm looking, right. It's very hard to understand what's happening because right. the press generally discourages you from looking into it. Mm. And any allegation of any fraud, they're saying there's no evidence. Look at these court cases. Right. They're throwing them out of court. Donald Trump's lawyers have nothing. So what's your estimate of election fraud? How serious it is and how likely are we to get to the bottom of it?
There's a lot of people who are amassing a great deal of evidence from places like Georgia, from Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, as well as Arizona. And these are the question marks. These are the places that people have questions about. Without getting into details, I'll just say the general picture looks like this. When people say, well, look, I don't get it. I understand the number of absentee ballots. I understand the number of the amount of voting by mail. But when they say that they're shutting down counting in Atlanta election night at 10:30, and the people in the press who are talking about this, I was watching Fox that night, and the people in the press just say, yeah, apparently there's not going to be any more counting in Atlanta. Well, why? Is no one asking a question, what's going on? Can this be explained? Perhaps, but no one is explaining it. What do we have to go on? What we have to go on is what Mark Zuckerberg and others were saying before the election, which is, look, no matter how funky it looks, no matter how long it takes to get these votes out, we have to tell people it's not illegitimate. Okay, well, why? What is the explanation? It's not enough just to say, no, ignore your own common sense, ignore your horse sense. Believe me, it's legitimate. And there are no explanations yet. There's just general clamor that anyone who objects to or anyone who finds something questionable and curious about the way these elections were conducted. It's the same with Russiagate. Anyone who thinks that Donald Trump is not a Russian spy and the FBI was up to something bad, they're the conspiracy theorist. That's where we are in this country. It's where we've been for 4 years.
So why are so many cases raised by the Trump's lawyers thrown out? For instance, recently in Pennsylvania.
I think we have to look at the governor of the state is the governor of the state is a Democrat. If we're looking at inside of different cities, most of these cities are run by Democratic Party machines, and that's been going on for a very long time. If you look at what happened, if you look at the places where there are questions, these are all swing states. People knew these were going to be battlegrounds, and they zeroed in on these different places, different counties, different cities where they figured they could have an effect. So that's what the debate is about. That's what the argument is about. Whether the campaign's lawyers, whether other people who are not affiliated with the campaign or the president, but people like Sidney Powell, Michael Flynn's lawyer, she's also been working a lot of these cases, whether they will be able to amass enough evidence in time is unclear. So this also is it's an enormous concern because we're heading into, regardless of what happens, we're heading into another 4 years where half of the country is looking at the other half with suspicion.
Do you have an idea what the Kraken is? Does Sidney Powell have a Kraken? What does she refer to? What is the whole? Because the way it was presented here, I know it's not true. But would they follow the New York Times? So when Rudy Giuliani announced that Sidney Powell is not working with him, the narrative in the New York Times was, well, she's even too crazy for Giuliani. Yet we know that they split ways because they had different legal tactics, probably because the president's lawyers cannot pursue active politicians. But how valid, what is the Kraken, and how valid do you think the information she has is? She looks very confident.
Sidney Powell is a very serious person. She still is Michael Flynn's lawyer. And this was a real struggle to get information showing what the FBI had done to General Flynn And she's always provided very good information. She's very aggressive. She's a very solid person. I think insofar as I don't think they had a falling out. I think there were a number of different issues. Some of them having to do with how legal representation is going to get financed, who was working for whom. So, that's a story for another day when we can figure out exactly what happened there. But right now, what everyone is looking, I'm not trying to defer it. I'm just saying I myself don't have enough details on that right now, and we're all looking at a whole bunch of other things. What the Kraken is, I believe I don't have a lot of insight into this. I think that what they're talking, I believe that the point is that there was a coordinated and centralized effort to tilt the vote in swing states through a number of different means. One of the things they're looking at is the particular the voting machines and the software that was run through these different machines. There are some things which we can look at. There are so many details coming out. And look, this is one of the problems we have. We're a press, where social media posts, when everyone raises this on Twitter, you'll get a remark underneath or an advisory note from Twitter saying this is whatever, not right. This claim of election fraud is made without evidence. Or
this claim is disputed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And now they do it. They also have now a system where you share something. And if it's right wing at all, it's my friend Caroline Glick, anything that's right wing, you open it and it says, do you want to read it before you share it? So I follow your Twitter feed always. And recently I've been doing this because it scared me. It actually scared me because you kept saying there's now or 2022 will be too late.
Yes.
So the struggle is now. So are you still hoping for a change of the election results?
I thought going to the election, and we may have spoken about this before, that I was very optimistic about Donald Trump's chances for re-election. I find it very difficult to believe that given the nature of his campaign, given the nature of the energy. It was I'm sure you watched a lot of these rallies. It was a historic moment in America. It was like as a friend referred to it as sort of the Church of America. It was just marvelous, right? It was not mostly about politics. It was about humor. It was about wit. It was about interaction. It was about celebrating America. And you have this guy in the middle of it, Donald Trump, who's sitting on a podium like this, and he's taking questions from the audience. It was one of the most moving things ever, right? As an American, you have. I don't think you have to be American to appreciate it, but you have to appreciate America to understand what was going on. So to see all these things, again, I just thought it was a festival. Compare that to this the absence of a campaign. A man who wore a mask the entire time. When he's gathering people, they're all isolated from each other in these big circles.
And they number 20.
It was just absolutely morbid. And so I think a lot of people, just by that fact, are surprised. How could this happen? Did it really happen? So there are many questions that remain to be answered. But as I was saying, going into the election, I believe that even with a Trump victory, which is necessary, even with a Trump victory, the Trump victory gives America 4 years to dig deeper trenches, higher towers, and stronger fortifications for the conflict that we are engaged in right now, the conflict that we understand. And it's not a civil war. It's not one half of America against the other. It's a very small number of people, in the American elite, the political, corporate, and cultural elite. That's really where the struggle is. So again, even had Trump won in a landslide, we would still be engaged in that conflict. We are engaged in that conflict now. So when we have different Republican Party officials, where they're effectively telling people, look, we get it. You're frustrated. You don't know what happened in 2020. We don't either. But look, you got to bear down and vote vote and make sure that we hold the Senate. We get these 2 Senate seats in Georgia. It's understandable why they say that, but the scope of what's happening is so much broader. The issue is so much bigger. Look at what's going to happen here. We had 75 million plus Trump voters. You can't send them home now and say, boy, you're disappointed. I get it. You know what the answer is? The answer is to go home and go grassroots and help out with your local Republican Party club. That's not going to happen because people understand the stakes. It's a very, very serious thing. So what do our elected officials understand what's going on here, what the nature of the struggle is about? So this concerns me very much looking at this.
And how would you define the struggle? So what's the core of it, in your opinion?
Yeah,
what is it
I think you remarked on yesterday. I was publicizing on Twitter an article I'd written for Tablet magazine about the Iran deal, about how a Biden administration would re-enter the Iran deal immediately. So I started thinking. Yeah.
And the striking thing you said is they want Iran to have a bomb. It's not like they're trying to.
Right. They want Iran to have a bomb.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I think that once we get down to it, if you look at what was going on during the last years of the second Obama term, right? The whole idea with the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was people were pointing to the sunset clause and saying that's problematic. That some of these restrictions will expire. Well, what does that mean? Just right, the fact that they expire.
No, the actual terms. It's a framework after which there are no the Iran deal framework, which was not an agreement because Obama bypassed the Senate, who would not approve of this deal. But the deal said that after 10 years, restrictions no longer apply. And Netanyahu's argument, Israel's argument was you are letting them build all the infrastructure to be able to jump to the military use of nuclear technology within a year. So you're giving them the bomb. And
Precisely.
Obama said they'll have the bomb anyway. We're just slowing them down. So sorry. Yeah.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And so it's very important for us to get to this point, because this is not only a reversal of U.S. policy on Iran, on the Islamic Republic, it's also a reversal of U.S. non-proliferation policy, right? I mean, the U.S. has given its allies a hard time whenever they try to go nuclear. Allegedly, some people say that Israel may have a nuclear weapons program. No. And this this is what I hear here on the street. But the United States has always been concerned, even about its allies, about proliferation. So this is an enormous reversal. But if you look at the facts, if you just look at the language, the fact that there are sunset clauses, like, wait a minute, so all these restrictions are going to expire? Yes, they will expire, at which time Iran will have an industrial scale nuclear weapons program. That's it. They legalized an Iranian nuclear weapons program. That's what Obama did. One of the things they learned over the last 4 years is that, given the vagaries of American politics, of our political system, they didn't expect Donald Trump to win. They thought it was going to be Hillary Clinton. They thought that Hillary Clinton would safeguard Obama's legacy and that the Iran deal would eventually go through. There would be no problems with it. Trump went in there and crashed it. He reimposed very heavy, very serious sanctions that thrust the Iranian regime into penury, right? Iranians went out on the street to protest against their regime. My point here is, if you look at how Obama speaks about things, how he speaks about America, in his memoir, he talks about the possibility of America,
which
he won't give up on.
Exactly.
Yeah, he hasn't given up on it. What does this mean? A man who was president of the United States for 8 years, he hasn't given up on the idea of America. I mean, it's amazing, but it's very simple what he means. What he means is, when you go back to 2008, before that, the first Obama election, when he talks about, we are how many days away from fundamentally transforming America. That's what our struggle is. Our struggle is about some people. It's about a narrow, however, quite wealthy and quite powerful clique who want to transform the way America is now into something else. And what does it look like? It looks like an oligarchy. It's very simple, right? A lot of people talk about, well, it's going to turn it into socialism and communism. I think it's fair to talk about it in terms of communism or socialism insofar as we're specific about what communism was, right? When we talk about dictatorship of the proletariat, it's the difference between so is the dictatorship representing the proletariat? No, they were the dictatorship over the proletariat. It represented an oligarchy, right? Regardless of the ideology, what it was meant to break everyone else and empower an oligarchy. That's essentially what we're looking at here. And our oligarchy is in partnership with the Chinese Communist Party. That's its center of gravity. That's the source of its great wealth. If you look at big tech, if you look at the different relationships that are happening here in Washington, if you look at the people that Joe Biden has named to what would be a Biden administration, I mean, the relationships that they have with the Chinese are just astonishing. They've represented China in Washington. They've worked with the party. So we are seeing, that's what we're seeing. And again, for people who didn't think that this was true, or it might be an exaggeration, again, to see the number of people who are being brought on board with their extensive relationships to China, it's astonishing.
Had it been known what the extent of the Biden family's dealings with China is, if they didn't shut down this New York Post expose, but anyone who wanted to know could know long ago, ever since say at least 2018 when Peter Schweitzer published his Secret Empires. But what struck me about your piece is that Obama is a globalist. So the way, if I understand what's standing in the way of globalists always is nationalism, and Donald Trump was an economic nationalist. Yes. So in a sense, in Obama's dream, America is an obstacle to globalism. Not a springboard to globalism.
Right. No, national sovereignty. Again, but just to come back to the Trump rallies. So you're right. He's an economic nationalist, but also he loves America, right? I mean, you couldn't miss it watching these rallies. It was just, again, I know I'm going to sound like a nut to lots of your viewers for a whole bunch of reasons, but to see how moving these rallies, okay, great. To see how people were celebrating America, how much they love America. Yes, this is anathema to, we call it a globalist vision, but I see globalism a little differently. I think that globalism is actually sort of cover for what's nothing. Look, the centerpiece of globalism is cheap Chinese labor, right? Cheap Chinese labor and a growing Chinese market. So when we talk about globalism, that's really what we're talking about. We're going back to China entering the WTO. We're talking about China getting permanent most favored nation status in the United States. That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about profound relationships with the Chinese Communist Party. That's who's at the center of it, and that's why our corporate, political, and cultural elite, their problems with Donald Trump, right? We've spoken about this before, but if you look how preposterous the whole thing is about Donald Trump wanting to build a wall and to shore up American borders, saying if you don't have borders, you don't have a country, right? Donald Trump is trying to protect American labor. And what was the response? Trying to protect American workers, that's racist, right? That's how preposterous it is. But if you look at what the race charge is for Barack Obama and for others, It's the only defense, because there's no way that you can possibly sell this as a progressive program. Look, what we're going to do is we're going to destroy America's manufacturing base. We're going to impoverish millions and millions of American workers. And when they complain, we're going to tell them, first of all, learn how to code. And second of all, you don't like it, you're a racist, right?
Yeah, the clingers.
That's right. That's where the racism bit comes from, right? You saw what happened after a number of Latino Protestants voted for Trump. Obama couldn't call them racist, so what did he do? He called them homophobes instead. That's why they voted for Trump, because they're against gay marriage, not because they think that Trump is talking about job security and pride and patriotism in the United States, but because they're homophobes. That's their overriding concern, gay marriage.
The whole identity politics movement is a form of tokenism. Instead of actually taking care of those who are weak, the working classes, you make some token gesture towards toilets for transgenders in universities, and then you're fine. Then you can screw all the hardworking people, which Bruce Springsteen taught me to appreciate, and now he hates Donald Trump.
Now he's by that.
Yeah, I was going to leave the country if Donald Trump wins to Australia.
That's what I'm saying. That's who these people are. It's a clown show, right? It's like, I'm for the working man. But here's the guy who's sticking up for the working man. No, now actually,
he's a racist. I think people like that.
I'm for corporate interests.
But they don't understand it. They do think that Donald Trump. When you talk to these people, they say Donald Trump made tax cuts for the rich, because the press has not been part of my beef with the press here is that people don't know what Trump's policy was. The only thing they have to say about Trump is racist, misogynist, grabber by the beep beep beep. Yeah. But sticking to your China point before we move on, because I just read I had a conversation here on The Gatekeeper with Peter Berkowitz.
Peter's a dear friend. Yeah.
He's a great guy, and he oversaw the China paper, the China challenge paper of the State Department, and China has a clear plan to use the free, open international market in order to take it over economically, and then turn it around and put it all under a communist dictatorship. That can't be what Obama wants, can it?
No. Look, one of the things that we've seen here, which is fascinating over the last 4 years, right? It's actually almost, it would derive. I wish we had Peter on, because he could tell us what kind of philosophy we're talking about here. But the number of different figures who realized their historical project, right? Donald Trump came to office talking about the swamp, talking about fake news, complaining about the press, complaining about the swamp. He had no idea all these different things were going on. He talked about China. China was a problem. But there was no way that he understood all of these problems in detail, the way all of these things surfaced over the last 4 years. My contention is that they themselves didn't know that they were all networked this closely. Hey, look, there's James Mattis over at the Pentagon. He's pushing Chinese interests too. Hey, look, here's James Comey at the FBI, who's fighting Donald Trump along with the editors of the Washington Post. So if you look, it's everywhere. The way that these people came to understand the extent of their own networks, right? They thought perhaps, well, we share interest here and here and there. But again, they all rose up and they all looked around and said, I guess we are a team. We all have these shared interests. And against them is not only Donald Trump, but what the excellent political theorist, writer Angelo Codevilla calls the country class, referring to Americans who value American traditions, American history, American symbols. Against them, again, what Donald Trump has called the swamp, but it's inadequate. What we've seen here the last 4 years, but even beyond, is a wide-scale campaign of desecration, not only against the human body and human spirit, but against American symbols, against American cities, against American history. That's what they were doing when during the George Floyd riots, they were tearing down statues. The 1619 Project. You think there's something noble about American history? It's not. It's garbage. That's what we've been watching. Right. And Americans are saying, no. We believe our country is a good place. We live here. We're decent people. Do we have flaws? Especially people of faith, Christians, Jews, Muslims. Do they look inside themselves? Yes, of course. As creatures of God, as human beings, they are flawed. We all recognize that we're flawed beings. When we get together, we're flawed. No one is saying America is perfect or everything is perfect. But that campaign against America is about something else.
So what's the prognosis? I saw your last tweet saying that if it's now or never. You've been saying that a few times since the election. This fight over election fraud is what we have. There will be no 2024. 2022 will be too late.
Right.
This is
America. The fight's moving into I believe the fight's moving, and I don't mean to sound too hippie-ish here, but the struggle is moving into another or an additional dimension, right? And it does come back to faith. It does come back to people who have faith in America, faith in each other, and also faith in God. I mean, I think that the struggle will have a more spiritual dimension, right? Because again, if you're looking at a campaign of desecration, attacking all of these different things, people will stand up for it. And so what I mean by too late, I mean, if Republican officials do not understand how important this moment is right now, and if they figure, well, it's just a regular political moment, they're incorrect. People are scared, and rightly so. The city I live in, Washington, D.C., where the George Floyd riots, the city has cut the police force by $15 million. Our police chief is leaving and moving to a community in Virginia where he will have more respect and fewer problems. Americans are worried and concerned. What I mean about it's now or never, I mean that for Republican officials. Again, people aren't going to say, yeah, well, now let's go real grassroots with the Republican Party. People will move to other things. I'm not saying they will ignore politics. I'm just saying the struggle is getting larger, right? And it's very impressive. In the long term, I'm extremely optimistic. It's so moving to go around, not just those rallies, but to hear other people. When we may have spoken about it before, but when I was reporting the permanent coup, going around and speaking to people, and people are just, I mean, they really do feel blessed to be living this incredible time full of meaning, right? Because as Americans of this generation and of younger generations, you're used to having things given to you, right? Inheriting things. You don't know really what your freedoms are, the gift that's been handed to you. And now, as people must stand up for it and declare their faith in these freedoms in the country, it's really exciting. Again, it's a dangerous time, but it's very exciting.
Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? It's
exactly.
The yellow taxi.
Johnny exactly.
Mitchell.
That's very true. That's absolutely true.
But in terms of politics, do you think that if Joe Biden is entrenched in the White House, it can be there will, as some have been saying, there will be no Republican administration from now and into a long stretch of the future?
It's possible. And there are other people who say on the other side, they say, well, a Biden presidency will be so riven with fractures. It's going to be hard for him to get anything done. I remind people it's not a Biden administration. It's the third Obama term. And if you look at the people they're bringing in, these are disciplined and ruthless people, which is why you have them using the resources of the intelligence community to spy on their opponents, right? And what did they do? Under a Republican House and Republican Senate, that's where they pushed the Iran deal, right? Against 2/3 of the country that didn't want the Iran deal. So a number of very, very bad things can happen. And if you have the press on your side, it's just amazing the amount of things that you can get done when you want to. It's not just having the White House, it's also having the press on your side and shoving things down the throats of Americans. Half the country doesn't know half the country is just beholden to the information they're getting from whether it's CNN or the Washington Post as it trickles down into local media.
And that is, this is frustrating for anyone who's been following you and Devin Nunes and Andrew McCarthy and people who've been exposing the coup against Donald Trump, and we're hoping to get justice, and we're rejoicing with John Durham, and this may all just be buried now, and they will have their way calling you, and in Israel, me, or the few who are interested in this esoteric thing, conspiracy theorists.
Right.
So we're not going to see justice done with people like Comey and John Brennan, who are...
Maybe not. It's possible we won't. But again, I mean, the tableau, the picture we're looking at is much bigger than this, even though certainly people who broke the law, and the FBI and the CIA, we want to see them have justice. But, imagine what this looks like in post-Soviet films, right? Who are the bad guys? Who are the good guys? No, seriously. It's like, we all know the work that doesn't last, right? And we all know the work that lasts. The people who manufacture lies because it's convenient, nothing that they say ever matters. They're done. And we see this happening now. I mean, it's a tragedy. The fact that, what used to be the standard bearer of press freedoms around the world, the U.S. media, it's a third world media at this point. And so that's a tragedy. But people are still speaking essential, important truths, putting out real news, giving real information, and fighting against a monstrous structure right now, which is 100% third world. I mean, it's Ministry of Information married to Ministry of the Interior, just like in the Arab states, just like in the former Soviet states. It's awful. But again, I hope you and your audience doesn't think I'm being Pollyannish to be hopeful, but to see the number of different people who are taking a very strong stand. And that's one of the great things about Twitter. As awful as so many things are that happen on there, you also see people who express very strong opinions. Not just that, they find information and they produce information. They produce real news for people. So also, we're Americans. We're supposed to be optimistic. So we are.
I listened to a podcast with Devin Nunes, whom I've been following since I read your book, The Plot Against the President, who followed how he, at the head of the House Select Intelligence Committee, exposed the lies to the FISC courts. And he said he tells his Republican colleagues, don't go to the media. They're the enemy. He didn't use enemy, but he said, don't go there. Don't get interviewed on CNN.
Right.
Don't go to MSNBC.
Absolutely.
Don't answer calls from the Washington Post. Is that what's to be done? I'm writing on. I'm writing on. My opinion column appears on Haaretz, which is the equivalent of the New York Times here.
Right.
And a lot of people tell me, stop doing that. Stop doing that. You're cooperating with... I made it a rule not to speak too sharply about Haaretz outside Haaretz because they let me write whatever I want.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
But is that what you think we should be doing? Just
that's what I think is going. Yeah, that's what I think is going on the American press. I don't know what's happened in these. I mean, look, because the people who are taking the so-called Republican or conservative side in the American media are, whatever. They're never Trumpers, or they are. They're actually legitimizing. They're legitimizing operations against. They're legitimizing operations against Republicans, against the Republican president. So I don't know what's happening how about this? I would be very concerned. I would say it would be similar if I knew that Haaretz and other papers were partnering with the chief of the Mossad and other and senior officials from Shin Bet to conduct information operations against the prime minister. I'd say that's really bad. I mean, that's really, that's third world stuff. So I don't know.
We're not far from it. Although here the problem is the FBI DOJ amalgam that we have that they have been, and I've been arguing that along. I'm not alone in arguing that, but they have been they're the Praetorian Guard of our real government, which is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court here it meddles in everything and has established itself as the last authority on anything. And if you dare try to change the balance of the branches of government, you may find yourself suddenly under investigation. So what they're doing generally is they are weakening all elected institutions. And now what we envy you in the fact that you can have a Devin Nunes at a commission in the parliament that can subpoena witnesses and information and can make recommendations for indictments. We don't have that. Our parliament is so weak that they are just afraid of that. But that's a different story. Georgia is the fate of the world now hanging in the balance in the Senate races in Georgia?
No, it's not. So I think it's important. It would be important if Republicans win in Georgia. Well, I mean, I have no idea whether or not they will. But as I said, this fight is different. This fight is not going to be contained to the Senate. Would a Biden administration try to stack the Supreme Court? Will it try to turn DC into a state? Yeah, I suspect they probably would. But the struggle is so much larger than that. The struggle is really about the future of this country. And that's what's significant. And again, if you look at when people place too much importance on these Senate races, what I've said is that remember that Barack Obama legalized the nuclear weapons of a terror state when the Senate and House were controlled by Republicans. There's a lot these people can do even when it's controlled by Republicans. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm not saying it's not significant. I'm not saying to hell with the Republican Senate. I'm just saying that is a very small part of what's going on here.
So maybe towards the end, I should ask Nikolai Chernyshevsky's question in Russia. What is to be done?
What is to be done?
Yeah. At any level, our level, your level as a journalist, the citizenship, what is to be done now, in your opinion? Locally about the election fraud issues and looking into the future if that struggle is lost.
How about, I think you and I texted briefly about this. How about if we use the mechanisms and instruments of globalism to undermine globalism? By what I mean by that is where you have people in the United States and Israel, people who love their country, strong nationalists, Zionists. We have people who believe in and love their country, and they're many ways under siege right now where they live, right, by extremely powerful forces. I think it's important for us all to understand what we're going through in our different places. I would say this is true in France. I would say it's true, right, because a lot of this is written off as they're right-wing fanatics. They're this, they're that. They're all fascists, right? Hungary, all sorts of different places. Brazil, that we see what's going on and so that we understand what's happening in these other places. Because right now, this struggle in the United States, it looks like the children of light against Donald Trump and the fascists. And that's not what's happening at all, right? So I think it's important for this larger struggle. And again, like mankind has been struggling for freedom all the time. I mean, it's not that long ago that the that the Soviet Union fell. I saw an article in the Times yesterday where they were interviewing all these different Chinese dissidents. And amazingly, the Times ran a piece saying that a lot of these Chinese dissidents prefer Donald Trump. They're worried about Biden's ties to China. I'm like, well, that makes sense. Then they're amazing. Right. Exactly. Yeah, right. Then they're quoting this one dissident who said, yeah, these elections look pretty strange to us. The Times inserts, makes that claim, that conspiratorial claim without evidence. Let me get this straight. You're telling me someone who lives under an authoritarian regime doesn't have a pretty good picture of how fake elections work? Of course, if you want to know, right, if you want to know what looks weird, that looks weird to that person for a reason. They know what they're looking at. So what I'm saying is, it's a time for, if you're asking what is to be done, I think that's an important thing, that people understand that our friends around the world, friends of the America that they love and cherish, like you, understand what's going on here. And you're putting this news out. It's fantastic. Frankly, I don't know if we can ask for much more now from our friends, except to hear us out and to help us get our message out.
Your film. Now it's free on YouTube. Don't miss it. Lee, before you go, because you mentioned this, and I'm curious, and I've heard this about you from people without details.
Okay.
At one point in your life, you decided to study Arabic and move to the Middle East and cover Egypt. How did that come about? Where did you go? What was your experience like?
Yes, because, it was right after 9/11. Actually, it started when I was living in Brooklyn. I was going out and playing soccer regularly in my local Prospect Park, and a lot of the guys I was playing with were Arab guys, like Yemenis, Egyptians. The Moroccans were really excellent players, and so I just started getting interested in Arabic music. So I'm like, oh, this is cool, and and so I started studying Arabic a little bit in New York. After 9/11, I said, "Whoa, all right, so this is an opportunity to study more Arabic and to find out what happened here in my hometown." So I wound up.
So you were like looking at these towers fall and saying, "What the hell just happened?"
Yeah.
Let me interrupt.
Yes, right.
Let me interrupt you with a short story, because I was a student at the graduate school at Rutgers, and I was on my third year then, and an Israeli student named Michal, she just arrived, and it was her first year, and one morning on September 11, I wake up and I get a call from her saying, "Do you think the university would be open today? Shall I go out to New Brunswick?" Because Rutgers is about an hour away. Yeah. And I said, "Why wouldn't it be open?" And she said, "Well, the Twin Towers were attacked and they fell." Yeah. And I said, "Oh, these new students, they have no idea what rubbish." Right. And I opened my AOL, and it was I think they didn't fall yet. It was just we were looking at the AOL screen with the towers burning. So you looked at it, and was that the catalyst for your deciding to go get into the depth of this?
Yeah, I was raised in New York. I was born in Puerto Rico, but I was raised in New York. I lived in New York my entire life, and it's a shocking thing to see your hometown, targeted, and many of your neighbors killed. I mean, I remember later that day when the towers did fall, walking around. I mean, we were walking around covered in the dust of our neighbors. I mean, and it was just terrible. So that focused my mind and said, I need to find out what happened here. So that's when I moved to Egypt a few months after, in January. And so I was in Egypt for about a year and a half. Then I was in Beirut for about 2 years. And, it was a very important experience. And I have to say, unfortunately, that looking at those societies for so long in that way, that is absolutely what helped me understand very quickly and very clearly what was happening here with Russiagate, right? The security services and the press. And this is a terrible lesson to have learned, and to see this happening in the United States, seeing the press turn this way and seeing these resources that are supposed to protect Americans from terrorism like 9/11 instead turned against Americans who simply wanted to participate in the political process, which is our right. So, Yeah, and I still, for Tablet, I still write a lot about the Middle East, especially Iran. But that article that came out this week, I mean, I don't know about you. I imagine many Israelis will feel the same way that I do. Well, Israelis have much more to be worried about than we do as Americans, pro-Israel Americans. But the idea that we may have to go through this Iran fight again, it's nonsensical. The amount of lies, especially after all the lies we've been through with Russiagate, because at least it looked like an honest debate last time, right? I had lots of friends across Washington who were involved in it. Who said, we can't do this. This is terrible. Experts, people like Omri Sarin, who's an expert, someone we all went to learn about, how nuclear weapons and nuclear programs work. So all these people who committed all of their intellectual resources, brilliant, astonishing people. And what did we learn? We learned it was all nonsense. It was a lie. It was a fake debate. So the idea we may have to go through that again, well, I mean, it's devastating, but it's not going to happen the same way because we're not going to pretend it's an honest debate. We're not going to pretend this is an argument over how many centrifuges or, exactly what will the sunset clauses look like? Or how much sanctions relief should they get? Or, how do we know if they're not giving money to Hezbollah or Hamas? We're not going to have them the same way. The people who are now advocating to give a terrorist state a nuclear weapons program are going to have to wear that around their neck for the rest of their lives. If that's what you believe, and if the Biden administration, Obama 3.0, can push it, okay, all right. You're going to have to live with that. We're not going to pretend it's a real debate and you're stopping war because the money that Obama gave in sanctions relief to the Iranians, they used that in the Syrian war. They used that to promote terror, international terror, and their terror armies throughout the Middle East. It's Hezbollah, whether it's about different Iraqi units, Afghanistan. So
the Houthis
at least
in Yemen.
The Houthis, right. So we're not going to pretend about this at this point, but it's profoundly dispiriting to see it may return to that.
Well, we may have to. It was hard for me to digest everything that happened, and it still is. But it's been a great help. Your Twitter feed is, and people have been asking me. I was telling them I'm going to talk to Lee today. I'll get back to you on some of these matters. So
it's very. I mean, look, it's really confusing. I understand why it's very hard for people to look at what they're seeing. Here's one thing, just very quickly.
Yeah.
So you got. I mean, I don't know. If we're running over, you can cut me off.
No. Sure.
This one thing that I think is interesting. So that on election night, Fox News called the state of Arizona with barely anyone reporting, and they refused to call. They refused to call Texas and Florida, very big states that were important for Trump. And the reason that Fox News's ratings have plummeted since that night is because of Fox News. Do you know why? Because the number of people who went on to explain what the Russiagate operation was, how it had happened, how they were targeting Trump and targeting Trump supporters and the foundations of the Republic. So they're going on Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham. Every night they're talking about it, rightly. So on November 3rd, when Fox News calls Arizona like that, viewers understood exactly what they were looking at. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't arrogance. It was an operation, and they knew they were being targeted. So as complicated as all of this is, the pieces are starting to come together, certainly for lots of Americans. They know now what's going on, and that's why it's scary to lots of people because they see what's happening, what's unfolding. Nonetheless, they're very, as I said, they're also excited that they're living in this time. They get to stand up for their country and articulate what it means to be an American and believe in freedom.
There's a Chinese saying which means to be an epithet, is that may you have an interesting life.
Right.
By which they mean they wish you hell. So
right.
no, but I get what you say, because it really is. It's a feeling that it's an historical time. It's just that what is at stake, and what I, in brooding moments, tend to think is maybe freedom was a brief interlude between totalitarianism of the mid 20th century and the gathering storm of the Chinese threat. So let's see what happens. I follow you on a daily basis, and maybe we can have another conversation. A little.
I'd love that. I enjoy it very much. Is whenever you're willing to bring me on and try to keep me from rambling on too much. That'd be great. I really enjoy it.
Believe me, it's a breath of fresh air for us. The media here is as terrible as it is in America.
I'm gonna tell my wife you said that, and she'll say, "So that's it. You don't get to talk to Gadi anymore. He's pushing nonsense down your throat. You believe it. You can't speak with him anymore."
So no, I'll remain on your side, whatever your familiar coalition becomes. Okay. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And stay safe, and we'll talk again soon.
You too. Thanks again.
Good night. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.